Rain hung heavy in the air, caught in the thick green ceiling of the rainforest. The world seemed still, except for one sound, a faint whimper, soft and frightened. A baby gorilla clung to a branch no wider than a man's arm, his tiny chest rising fast, eyes darting through the dripping leaves. Somewhere behind him, his mother's cry echoed, deep, aching, desperate. And far away, the faint snap of a twig carried through the mist. It was the kind of sound that didn't belong here. Then, silence. The jungle held its breath. And in that suspended moment, the story of this forest began, hours earlier. The forest had been peaceful, a living cathedral of light and shadow. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the tall trees, painting gold across a carpet of ferns. Every surface shimmered with dew. A butterfly drifted through a beam of light, wings glowing like stained glass. The air was thick with the smell of rain-soaked earth and wild orchids. Deep within this green world, a gorilla troop moved quietly through the undergrowth. Their leader, a great silverback with shoulders like boulders, walked at the center of the group, his presence calm but commanding. Beside him, mothers carried their young, clinging to their backs or chests, trusting completely in the rhythm of their movement. Among them was one especially small infant, only a few months old. His fur was soft and black as night, his eyes round and curious. He clung to his mother's belly and mirrored every move she made, tugging at leaves when she foraged, scratching his head when she paused, copying even her size. For the baby, the forest was a world of wonder. Every droplet on a leaf, every rustle in the branches above, was something new. He reached out his tiny hand to touch a beetle crawling across his mother's arm. She watched him patiently, her eyes gentle, her breath slow and steady. Around them, the jungle sang, cicadas, frogs, the distant call of hornbills. High above, a woman crouched on a wooden platform hidden among the trees. Dr. Elena Moreau lifted her camera slowly, careful not to disturb the troop below. She had spent 3 years following these gorillas, earning their cautious trust. Her job was to observe, not interfere, to witness the quiet rhythms of a family most humans would never see. To her, this place was sacred. Through her binoculars, she watched the baby yawn and press his face into his mother's fur. She smiled. "You're growing fast," she whispered to herself. Her notebook was filled with pages of sketches and notes, feeding habits, playtime, grooming patterns, a story of peace written in the language of patience. But that morning, something felt different. The forest was too quiet. Elena paused, listening. The usual chatter of monkeys and birds had faded into uneasy stillness. Even the insects seemed to have hushed. Then, far in the distance, came a sound that didn't belong. A faint metallic crack, followed by another. Gunfire. Her heart sank. Poachers. She lowered her binoculars and scanned the forest floor. The silverback had already heard it too. His chest puffed, and he released a deep, warning rumble that rolled through the trees like thunder. The troop froze. Mothers pulled their infants closer. The jungle's song stopped altogether. Elena knew what this meant. The poachers weren't far, maybe a kilometer away. They hunted bushmeat, sometimes even young gorillas for the illegal pet trade. Her hands trembled as she reached for her radio, whispering to her assistant at base camp. "Possible shots near Zone B," she said. "Stay alert." Down below, the silverback motioned the group to move. They began to retreat, melting into the thickest parts of the undergrowth where the forest was darkest and safest. But in the confusion, the smallest infant slipped from his mother's hold. It happened in an instant. A tangle of vines, a startled cry, and he was gone. Elena gasped softly as she saw it through her lens. The mother's frantic searching, the silverback's booming calls. The troops circled back, but the baby had vanished into a maze of roots and ferns. Elena dropped her camera and climbed down from the platform, her boots sinking into the wet soil. She knew she wasn't supposed to interfere, but leaving the infant alone, especially with hunters nearby, wasn't an option. She moved fast but careful, scanning the ground for signs of the baby's trail, disturbed leaves, tiny prints, broken stems. The forest seemed to close around her. Every sound was sharper now, the drip of rain from a leaf, the rustle of something unseen in the distance. And then she saw it, a patch of trembling vines near the base of a fallen tree. She crouched low. Beneath the green tangle, The baby gorilla sat trembling, his arm caught in something glinting faintly. A snare. A cruel wire loop tied between roots, meant for antelope but deadly for anything that stepped wrong. "Easy, little one," Elena whispered, her voice barely a breath. She took a slow step forward, careful not to startle him. The baby whimpered softly, tugging his arm, the metal biting deeper. Elena knelt beside him. The wire was tight, already cutting into the soft skin. Her fingers shook as she reached for her pliers, kept in her belt for emergencies like this. She glanced around. The forest felt heavy, watchful. Every shadow seemed alive. She worked carefully, loosening the wire bit by bit. The baby's eyes met hers, wide, dark, and filled with pain. For a heartbeat, everything was silent except their breathing. It was as if the forest itself was holding still to watch this fragile exchange between two worlds, human and wild. Then, from somewhere behind her, came a faint voice. Not an animal's, a man's. Elena froze. The Poachers. She pressed low to the ground, covering the baby with her body. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The voices grew closer. Laughter, the clinking of metal, the careless sound of boots on wet leaves. She could smell the smoke from their cigarettes. The silverback's distant roar shattered the silence. The Poachers stopped talking. A heartbeat later, chaos erupted. Shouts, crashing branches, and the unmistakable thunder of the gorilla charging through the forest. Elena didn't look. She yanked the wire free, scooped the infant into her arms, and ducked into the thickest ferns she could find. She didn't know if the silverback's rage was meant for the men or for her, but she felt it vibrate through the earth, for minutes that felt like hours. She crouched in the shadows, holding the trembling baby against her chest. The forest was filled with sound, the cries of the fleeing men, the deep rumble of the gorilla, the pounding rain that finally began to fall. And then, quiet again. Elena looked down. The baby's breathing had slowed. He was safe, for now, she whispered softly. "You're all right, little one." Her voice broke. "You're all right." Through the mist, the first drops of sunlight broke through the trees. Steam rose from the wet leaves. The forest exhaled, but in the stillness, one truth echoed in her mind. Something had changed here. The peace that once seemed eternal had been broken. Rain poured through the canopy in endless sheets, turning the jungle into a world of noise and shadow. Every leaf dripped, every branch trembled, and the air smelled of wet soil and iron. In the middle of it all, Dr. Elena Moreau was running, slipping through mud, pushing vines aside, following the sound of a cry she could barely hear over the storm. The baby gorilla was somewhere ahead, lost and afraid. She had to find him before they did. The forest around her pulsed with fear. Distant thunder rolled like warning drums. Each flash of lightning showed only fragments, the edge of a tree, a patch of moss, a movement she couldn't name. Then, through the curtain of rain, she saw him. The infant was trapped. He sat hunched at the base of a tree, his arm caught in a loop of wire. The snare had cut deep into his small wrist, blood mixing with rain as he pulled and whimpered. His cries were soft but desperate, the kind of sound that stopped time. Elena's breath caught. She dropped to her knees in the mud. "Shoo. Easy, little one," she whispered, voice trembling. The baby froze at the sound. His eyes, dark, glassy, full of pain, met hers. For a second, she saw both terror and trust in that gaze. He didn't understand her words, but he could feel her calm. Slowly, she reached out a hand, palm open. The snare was thin, made of steel wire twisted tight. It had been set for bushmeat, not for a baby gorilla. But the forest doesn't care who steps where. Elena took a deep breath and pulled a small tool from her belt. The same pliers she'd used countless times to disarm traps during her patrols. Her hands were shaking now, though not from the cold. Every sound around her felt like a warning. A crack of thunder, a branch snapping, a bird giving an alarm call somewhere above. She worked faster. The wire resisted, biting deeper as she loosened it. The baby winced, but didn't pull away. His trust, fragile and trembling, held her together. Rain soaked her clothes, plastered her hair to her face. She could feel her heartbeat echo in her fingertips. Then, behind her, a voice, rough. "Human," Elena froze. "Over there." I saw movement. Her blood turned cold. The Poachers, they were back. She turned slightly, seeing shapes moving through the rain. 3 men, maybe 4, dark figures with rifles slung across their shoulders. She couldn't run, not with the baby still caught. Her mind raced. She pressed herself low, whispering urgently, "Stay quiet, please." The baby whimpered again. Too loud. One of the men laughed. A sharp, cruel sound. "What's that? Did you hear that?" The others moved closer. Elena worked faster, her pliers slipping in the mud. Her hands trembled, her breathing shallow. Then she heard the wire snap loose. The baby jerked free with a soft cry. Relief flooded through her, but it lasted only a second, until the nearest man shouted, "There! Someone's there!" Elena's heart pounded. She scooped the baby into her arms and turned to run, but her foot sank deep into the mud. She stumbled, clutching him tight. The men were shouting now, pushing through the brush, closing in. And then, everything changed. A roar shattered the air. It wasn't thunder this time. It was deeper, older, alive. A sound that made every creature in the forest freeze. The baby went still in Elena's arms. Even the rain seemed to pause. Out of the mist, a massive shape emerged. The silverback. He moved like a storm-given form, black fur slick with rain, muscles tense and powerful beneath his skin. His chest rose and fell with a low, rumbling growl that rolled through the trees. The poachers stopped dead, their confidence melting into fear. "Run!" one of them shouted, but it was too late. The silverback charged. Mud exploded beneath his feet as he barreled forward. The forest became chaos, men stumbling, rifles clattering to the ground, leaves flying as branches snapped. One man fell and screamed, scrambling backward through the mud. The others fled, crashing through the trees in blind panic. Elena ducked low, shielding the baby against her chest as the silverback tore past her. She could feel the ground shake beneath his weight. He was a force of nature, the embodiment of the forest's fury. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. The rain returned, steady and relentless. The jungle was quiet again, except for the heavy sound of breathing, hers and his. Elena lifted her head slowly. The silverback stood only a few steps away. He was massive, his black fur shining under the storm's light. Mud streaked his arms and chest, and a cut above his brow bled faintly, washed clean by the rain. His eyes locked on her. Elena didn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to bow, to disappear, but she stayed still. She knew what would happen if she showed fear. The baby stirred in her arms, whimpering softly. The silverback's gaze dropped to him. For a moment, time stopped. Lightning flashed, illuminating the 3 of them. The man-beast, the trembling woman, and the helpless infant between them. Rain dripped from the silverback's chin. His breathing slowed. His massive hands hung at his sides, no longer fists. Elena whispered softly, barely audible over the storm. "He's safe. I promise." She didn't know if he understood her words, but something in her tone made him pause. His head tilted slightly. His nostrils flared as he inhaled, recognizing the scent of his child. Then, with a sound that was almost a sigh, he stepped closer. Elena's muscles locked. The silverback's shadow fell across her. He leaned down, his face inches away from hers. She could see every scar on his skin, every drop of rain clinging to his fur. His eyes, deep, dark, ancient, held no rage now, only something she couldn't name. That he looked at the baby once more. The infant reached out a trembling hand, fingers brushing the wet air between them. And in that moment, something passed between them, a silent understanding older than language. The silverback straightened. His gaze lingered on Elena one last time. Then he turned and disappeared into the mist, each heavy step fading until only the rain remained. Elena sat frozen, her breath shaking, her heart still pounding against the small body she held. The forest around her seemed to breathe again, birds calling softly from the canopy, frogs singing somewhere far away. She looked down at the baby gorilla in her arms. His eyes were half closed, his body warm and trembling against her chest. "You're all right," she whispered. "He's gone. You're safe now." The storm began to ease. Raindrops slowed to a soft drizzle, falling gently through the leaves. The air smelled of earth and life. Elena arose slowly, her legs unsteady, and took one last look at the place where the silverback had vanished for the first time in hours. She let herself breathe that eye in the distance. Thunder rolled again, softer now, fading into the hills. The danger had passed, but something deeper had changed. She had looked into the eyes of a creature both terrifying and magnificent, and seen mercy. The jungle, fierce and ancient, had reminded her of its truth that it could destroy, but it could also forgive. And as the storm drifted away, the forest seemed to whisper that truth back to her. Not all battles end in blood. Some end in understanding. The jungle woke slowly after the storm. The air hung thick with the smell of wet leaves and soil, and mist drifted low over the forest floor like breath from a sleeping giant. Sunlight broke through in pale bands, catching on raindrops still clinging to the vines. Birds began to sing again, one voice at a time, cautious, then confident, until the forest hummed with quiet life. Dr. Elena Moreau stood just beyond the clearing, her clothes still damp from the days before, her body weary but her mind replaying the same memory over and over. The silverback's eyes in the rain. She could still see the moment when he had stopped his fury and simply looked at her. That long, silent gaze between two creatures who should have feared each other, yet didn't. It had changed her now. Days later, the forest had returned to its rhythm, pretending nothing had happened. But Elena knew it remembered, just as she did. Behind the safety fence of the small rehabilitation camp, the rescued infant gorilla slept curled against her arm. His small chest rose and fell with soft, uneven breaths. A faint scar circled his wrist where the wire had been. He was healing, though slowly. Every few hours, he would wake, reach for her hand, and cling to it until sleep pulled him back under. The camp was quiet, tucked deep within the trees. Built by conservationists who worked endlessly to return injured or orphaned wildlife to their homes. The huts were simple, made of wood and canvas, blending into the green around them. Beyond the fence, the jungle spread endlessly, vast, untamed, and full of secrets. Elena moved carefully as she fed the infant from a small bottle. The formula was warm, and the baby's lips puckered gently as he drank. She smiled faintly, but it was a tired smile, the kind that comes after too many nights of worry. The rain had washed away the blood and fear, but it had left something else behind. Humility. She had come here to protect gorillas, to study them, to understand them. But now she realized how little she truly knew. The silverback's mercy, his decision to let her go, had left her with more questions than answers. What made him spare her? Did he understand that she had saved his child? Or had he simply seen no thread in her trembling form? Sometimes, as the mist rolled in each evening, she caught herself watching the trees, half expecting him to return. She didn't know why. Weeks passed. The baby grew stronger. His fur thickened, his eyes brightened, and his tiny arms grew firm with life. He began to explore his surroundings, grabbing leaves, chasing shadows, and tugging gently at Elena's hair whenever she sat close. He laughed, a breathy, high-pitched sound that echoed like joy itself. Each laugh felt like a small miracle, but as his strength returned, so did his restlessness. He began to look toward the forest more often, pressing his small hands against the fence, peering into the green beyond. It was time. The morning of his release came quietly. The air was cool and golden, the kind of light that feels like forgiveness. Elena packed her field bag with care, notebook, tranquilizer kit, a small camera, but her hands hesitated as she tied the straps. She had known from the beginning that this day would come. Still, part of her wasn't ready to let him go. The rangers loaded the transport crate onto the back of a small vehicle. The baby sat inside, calm but curious, clutching a leafy branch she had given him. His dark eyes followed her every move. They drove in silence. The forest closed around them like a living tunnel, vines brushing against the truck, light flickering between the trees. When they reached the base of the hill where the troop had last been seen, the rangers stopped. Elena climbed down, her boots sinking softly into the damp soil. She knelt by the crate and unlatched the door. For a long moment, the baby didn't move. He looked at her, uncertain. She smiled faintly. "Go on," she whispered. "Home is waiting." He hesitated once more, then stepped out, small hands gripping the wet grass. He turned toward the trees, sniffing the air. The jungle was alive with sound. Insects buzzing, birds calling, leaves whispering in the breeze. He seemed to know where to go. Elena followed at a distance, heart pounding. The baby moved slowly but with purpose, stopping every few steps to listen. Then, from deep within the trees, came a low rumble, soft but unmistakable. The silverback. The sound carried through the forest like a heartbeat. The baby froze, then gave a small, answering cry. A thin, hopeful sound. From the shadows, the silverback emerged. His massive form looked almost unreal against the golden light filtering through the canopy. His fur glistened. His eyes, dark and calm, locked on the small figure before him. Elena stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. She could feel the power of his presence, the same force she had felt that day in the storm. But this time, there was no rage, no fear, only stillness. The baby made a soft sound and crawled forward. The silverback waited, unmoving, until the infant reached him and pressed his small hand against his father's chest. The giant leaned down, inhaled deeply, and let out a low, rumbling sigh. It was acceptance. Elena felt her throat tighten. She wanted to step forward, to say something, but there was nothing to say. This moment belonged to them. She simply watched, her heart swelling with relief and awe. The silverback's gaze shifted to her. For several seconds, they looked at each other again. The same silent connection as before. No hostility, no distance, just quiet understanding. The forest around them seemed to fade away until there was only that gaze. Two beings from different worlds sharing one fragile truth. Both had protected the same child. Then, slowly, the silverback turned and led the baby back into the green. The troop appeared from the mist. Mothers, juveniles, even the older males, gathering to welcome the lost one home. Elena stood still until their shapes disappeared into the forest. The sounds of their movement blended into the rhythm of the jungle, until it was impossible to tell where they had gone. Only then did she exhale. The sun had risen fully now, spilling gold across the leaves. Mist swirled around her ankles. The jungle, wounded and healed, seemed to breathe again. She whispered softly to the air, "Thank you." A breeze moved through the trees, rustling the leaves in reply. The forest didn't answer in words, but it didn't have to. It had spoken in its own way, through mercy, through survival, through the life that continued no matter the scars that Elena turned to leave. She looked back one last time at the place where the silverback had stood. The light shimmered there, gentle and warm. Somewhere in the distance, a gorilla's call echoed faintly, deep, calm, eternal, and for the first time since that storm, the forest truly exhaled.